So the session that I'm running, this is the last session of the conference. Again, we are going to have a couple of people speak, and then we're going to have definitely some interactive discussion. What I really want to do in this case is I want to have sort of two parts to this session. The first part will be the panel discussion. Each person is going to get 5 minutes, and I am very, very good on keeping people on track. So you get 5 minutes, and you will be cut off. So 5 minutes, say your most important points first, so that you get through them. So everybody will get 5 minutes. Then I'll open it up to questions, and I also have a few questions for the panelists. And then the second part of the talk today is going to be some open discussions that kind of summarize some of the themes that we've talked about at the conference. Okay, so here are the panelists. This is very, very odd to hold this little box, but so here are the panelists for today. They're not sitting in the order that's listed, but that's okay, doesn't matter. So maybe just raise your hand in case people don't know you. So we have Grahame, who is a math and e-learning consultant. Marina, so raise your hand, just so that in case people don't know you. Paul, from the University of Waterloo. Sorry, Marina's from Turin, University of Turin. Shireen, from Imperial College. Phil, from Imperial College. And Christian from the Technical University of Denmark. So, as I said, everybody's going to get 5 minutes to talk on something, either that they've been working at their school, some of their views on pedagogy and outreach, or just sort of any projects that they might be working on. All right, so maybe we'll go in this order, since that way I can easily tell. You have to hold it, and you just turn it up, and then
Okay, good afternoon everyone. So I'm Grahame Smart, okay, and although it says I'm a maths and e-learning consultant, I was a maths teacher in London for 10 years, up until the age of 18, so A-level, so just before you go to university. And probably the key thing for me that's missing from 95% of maths lessons that I observe, and I go into schools and inspect, I watch a lot of maths lessons, I develop a lot of work with teachers to develop their skills. 95% of lessons miss one vital ingredient, which actually Paul mentioned just a few seconds ago, and that's relevance. It's not relevant to their everyday life. Now I know at a really high level, sometimes that's hard, but lower down the food chain, it's possible to make things more relevant. And I'll give you an example, okay? And it's not a maths example, okay? When I was driving to the train station to come here to Copenhagen, a song came on. And I'll tell you what the song was. It was Ace of Base, and it's All That She Needs Is Another Baby. I would put it on, but I'm not allowed to have any slides or anything. And that song, straight away, took me back to a summer that I had, one of the best summers of my life in Greece. And I partied hard, I had a good time. And that song took me straight back there. Now, why is it that that song did that? Well, you can all speculate for that. I don't think I have one mathematical memory like that. Yeah? You get where I'm coming from? So my point is, using this technology, can we create a few moments where you look at something, it takes you back, you think, yeah, I get it, that's why. And my answer to that is, yeah, you can, because I've done it. So that's my key thing. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you can't make this relevant. No, you can. It's hard, but you can do it. And Phil and I did a piece of work last Friday where we took a group of students, and I'm talking about this example because it's fresh, A, and B, it's a very rare scenario. We took some students from different schools in London. They came along to Imperial. We set the whole day up. Now, bear in mind, they'd never used Maple. They'd never met us. So this is a rare thing. They've got no prior conceptions, misconceptions, whatever you want to say. They don't know anything about the product, the technology, and they came in and they worked the whole day on AS level math. Now you think about the potential pitfalls, some of the things that you've been talking about. The technology allowed me, very, very quickly allowed us to work out their start point. Some of those students were working at the high end, some of those students were working at the low end. That's not easy to detect with a group of students that you've never met before. You need to detect that quickly so that you can then plan out that path. You was talking about the AI algorithm, working out the trajectory that the student needs to take based on their ability. That's what I call differentiation as a teacher, not in a mathematical sense, but in a pedagogical sense. I managed to get that word out there. The technology now allowed me to do that. The technology allowed us to assess really quickly. But the technology also allowed us to actually deliver the content in a way where there was relevance to their real life. And it's a shame I can't show you some examples, but we really did that. And what some of the comments that came back from the students were, we didn't feel like we were just applying a set of procedures or algorithms. We felt like we were actually really using the maths to solve the problem. And I have that feedback, and I'll make sure I'll give the slides so you can actually see the feedback that the students gave. The other thing that's interesting as well, I didn't deliver it just in the Mobius platform. I had to use Google Classroom to hold it together, because one of the main problems I had as a teacher when I was actually teaching A-level students was the Maple TA platform could tell me if the answer was right or wrong, but what I really wanted to know is where the student had gone wrong. And this is something that was presented in the first session. And I wasn't using it for high stakes examinations, but what I wanted the students to be able to do is I wanted to see if they had gone wrong, where they'd gone wrong. So what I did was, they took a picture, they worked on papers and all, they took a picture, they uploaded it to Google Classroom, so then I had the working out, and then it evaluated the final answer. The activities were assessing whether they could do the content. So it was a hybrid approach, but I'll tell you something that did. It was interesting. In my opinion, I'll be interested to see if Phil agrees with this, because the Maple content was sort of immersed inside the Google Classroom, I think that reduced the anxiety level for the student, because they were using Google products that they was already acclimatised to. And that was something that I found very interesting. We had to use Google Classroom because that's all the logins. They already have logins in London for all the Google apps and Google Classroom, so that was one of the factors. But the point is, how long have I got? How long have I got?
15 seconds.
Right, okay, so in a nutshell, the technology can make it relevant, real, and it just might mean that you remember it, a bit like Ace of Base song, 1992, Greece. It was a great summer. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow, that was another 2 seconds.
All right, so the next speaker is Marina.
Hello to everybody. It was a pleasure to meet you again. With some of you, we started to work together. Okay. At the University of Turin, we have a long history with Microsoft, and now, of course, with the DigitalEd. Why? Because starting from 18, we adopted Maple in doing research. Especially people at university like me, algebraic geometers that started to use Maple in doing real research in algebraic geometry, understood that we have a power tool, a CAS, that can change completely teaching and learning STEM disciplines. And after some years, especially at University of Turin, we adopted the Maple TA in 2003 in order to change teaching and learning STEM. We use all of the tools. We started with Maple, essentially because all of us are convinced that problem solving is very important, right? But Maple is a tool, a CAS, together with Maple TA and Maple Now, that allows students to, starting from a real world, and to understand why math or physics are really important to study. Using a CAS means that the students have different registers. It can make a picture, then can use a symbolic or numerical, do calculation, but he has a tool and he can concentrate to find a strategy of how to solve a problem. And we brought also some papers on these things in order to show that adopt problem solving with the CAS and with Maple TAs change really the way of learning math. Then, with Maple TA, we develop a model of formative assessment. Formative assessment is fundamental. And in the formative assessment, teacher want to put a score not only in individual activities, but also collaborative activities. So, for this reason, we use Maple TA inside Moodle platform, which is a virtual learning environment. The University of Torino is developer of Moodle. It means that we also develop a way how to use the same gradebook for the scores for collaborative activities and, for instance, the assignment or assessment in Maple TA. So in the same gradebook. It's very important. Of course, with the analytics allow to change or to change the way of teaching. Then for instance, we wrote a paper with my research group, 10 good reasons, the title is 10 good reasons why adopt Maple TA in teaching. But it is very useful also for adaptivity. We now, all of us know that we have students with different aptitudes. We have to adopt different teaching strategies. And if we develop some example of question bank in Maple TA, that when the student fail, start a adaptive path for him. It depends on the point when he fails. So it means that it's real adaptive teaching. For this, we develop also a model of training teachers, because if you want that the things real change, we have to start with the teachers at different levels. We have in Torino, I'm in charge of a national project for the high school called Krmpotic and Solving, and we have 2,000 teachers and 20,000 students. And we had a very strong program in training teachers how to use Maple TA. Now we are ready to organize a boot camp in order to have a strong group to use Möbius, always inside Moodle, in order to change the way to teach.
Okay, thank you very much. Good. All right, now it's up to you, Paul. You have to continue it along. You have 5 minutes.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. I'm from the University of Waterloo. As you may have sort of guessed by now, we're sort of working like maniacs to convert a lot of our courses into digital format to present them online. Typically, the way this works is that an instructor hands their notes over to the Center for Extended Learning, this group that Stephen Tosh was representing today, and they would convert this into an online course. An instructor would give some feedback and back and forth. So Owen Woody, who's also in the audience, and myself, I guess about 1.5 years ago, explored a new model where the instructor themselves, so myself and Owen, would actually create the course. So we've been working in Mobius for a while now, and put together Mobius lessons and assessments for the course that we normally teach, which is the first year calculus courses for science students. This is a course that typically has an enrollment of around 1,000 students across 10 sections, and then also an online section. So huge audience, wide variety of backgrounds. And we wanted to see, for the on-campus students, could we create Mobius lessons that would complement the lectures well? Maybe we still have lectures, of course. And for the online students who wouldn't normally have lectures, could we hopefully replicate the lecture experience? Not perfectly, but decently well, hopefully. Using some sort of narrated slideshow or something like this in Mobius. So we did this, and it has gone really well. So the pilot, as I said, is basically wasn't a small pilot. We had 1,000 students, 10 instructors. The lessons were interactive, so narrated slideshows. You go through, answer questions, throughout, and this hopefully kept students engaged. A few observations, I guess. I can talk about assessments in a moment as well, depending on time. But for the lessons, a few things we noticed that were encouraging was the rest of the teaching team is primarily made up of people teaching for the first time. They found it really easy to pick up these lessons and basically use them as inspiration for their on-campus lectures as well. So they really liked that. Students seem to really enjoy working through the lessons. It also appeared to prove some causation, I guess, with more statistics, but their performance improved having these Mobius lectures available. I think the stats were something along the lines of, so for the past 10 years, if you look at the withdraw fail rate, that rate dropped by about 10% from the average. So we have a lot more students going through, that's for the first calculus course, a lot more students succeeding in the first calculus course, and then comparable number succeeding in the second course, which is actually an improvement when you consider where more of the students from the first course are actually making it through into the second course. So very promising results there. In terms of, what am I doing? Okay. In terms of assessments, so we also had all of our assessments, not all of our assessments, what would normally be the handwritten assignments, right? We moved that to Mobius. Because of the power of having Mobius there to automatically grade students' work, this allowed us to take advantage of the spacing effect. See, right? We could have many assignments in addition to the interactive lessons, and they would be graded automatically, right? So student would do the interactive lesson, get some feedback. There'd be an end of lesson assessment that they could complete after that, and then a cumulative sort of assessment, later on, maybe a week or 2 weeks later. So we could space this out. As a result, though, this is a lot of assessments, right? A lot of them are short, but ultimately you end up with about 40 assessments for the semester. Marking 40 assessments and distributing them and stuff like that by paper just wouldn't be possible. So this was really nice to be able to do that. And students seem to enjoy these assessments, and the instant feedback really helps a lot. And with the algorithmic questions, right, they never get the same questions as their friend, and they can try as many times as they need until they master it. So that was also really promising. So we have a lot more things to look at, a lot more questions to ask and try and answer, but that was the basic project. We're moving forward, we're going to do another iteration of this course and see where that goes. So, thanks.
Okay, hello everyone, nice to see you all again, being here again with you. Many of you may have heard us talk about metric in the past, but today I'm going to talk to you about some digital strategy work that we've had going on at Imperial. We've been reviewing strategy to cover us for the period 2018 to 2025. There's a couple of strands to that, and we're covering the first stages of that, which is a curriculum review across all the faculties, which will hopefully give us some redefined learning outcomes. From that, we are looking to achieve a pedagogical transformation. And the aims of that really are so that we can see more interactive teaching involved in learning, which will involve things like active learning, team-based learning, problem solving, playful type learning. We also want to see more digital and technology enhanced learning, and tools like Mobius will help us do that. I'm hoping to transform into the delivery and assessment elements of what we do. We also see that support for students in some of the learning that's delivered should be more adaptive and personalised, and that would also help them provide more support for them. And also in the long run, hopefully more support for staff, because if we can have more reusable items, a bigger set of resources that staff can use, we think there'll be more efficiency and enhancement that can be embedded within the learning. Because currently, as many of you know, teaching staff, academic, there's quite a high overhead in building and designing any kind of innovation within the learning. So there's two projects I'm involved in that. The first one is about transforming maths. So Phil and I are both involved in this one, and it's across the whole university, and we're currently looking at reviewing and transforming the way we teach maths across the college. The first phase of that is around mapping, identifying and mapping the areas that the topics and subjects that are being taught across undergrad year 1 and 2. And then we will, once we've got a handle on those, we plan to then look at how we can redesign the way that that can be delivered, working with all the teaching staff in a way to see how what their ideas are too, with the hope that we can get to a more shared and common approach of teaching maths. And the other part of the project is, I work within engineering and I support the academics across 10 engineering departments. So the other thing we're looking at doing is, as part of our curriculum review in that faculty, is to see how we can transform our learning and teaching within each of the disciplines. Maths is a big part of that, but it isn't just maths. And what we want to do is look at common areas and really redesign what we're calling our on-campus experience for students. It incorporates all these elements. So technology is part of it, but pedagogy is another big part of it. And I think some of the stuff that we talked about this week earlier is around maybe the role of an academic, the role of the teacher instructor shifts slightly maybe with technology to help hopefully keep that fun and active learning and build that sort of interest and memories that we talk about within learning and teaching. So hopefully in future events I'll be able to tell you more about that project as we go across this field.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? So I'll take your advice and I'll start with the last thing I was going to say. I'm going to talk about what you might call outreach. Certainly my institution would regard it as outreach. And what I want to say amounts to that in practice, for those of us doing it, it amounts to cross-sector collaboration with experts from other sectors who have experts in things in which we're not expert. So here's Imperial, this elite institution. There's a whole bunch of stuff we don't know, and one of the things that I'm interested in as we do what we call outreach is the benefits that we can get by using a tool like Mobius as we pool our expertise with experts from other sectors. So if I don't get to saying that again, that's what I was going to say at the end. Let me sketch some background now. So we've got this resource called Metric, which has existed for many years. It's quite a large, quite a comprehensive maths courseware resource that we originally built, I and another guy, in client-side Java, and then browsers stopped supporting that. So we were in the situation of having to turn around a new version of this resource, fully functional, doing everything the old one did inside an academic year. And along came Mobius in its beta version and saved us. I mean, we worked pretty hard at it as well, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without Mobius. We talked about that at previous conferences, so I won't say too much more about that. Except to say that in this resource, there's obviously a bunch of mathematics that is for supporting our undergraduates, multivariable calculus, Laplace transforms, Fourier stuff, and medical stats, all sorts of things. But there's also what we would call prerequisite content, aimed at our students who are coming to us from high school. And so there's a lot of overlap between the content in our resource and the stuff that students need to learn in their last 2 years of high school mathematics, what we call A-level. And so it occurred to us that if we could repurpose some of our content, we might be able to use it to improve outcomes for those students, or to help improve outcomes for those students. And if we did that, potential pool of users of our resources, which were originally developed for our own students, could be really quite large, quite an exciting idea. So Grahame has already talked about one of the projects that we're working on. We've just got underway with a pilot project with London students involving DigitalEd and Grahame. He's reported on some of the things that we found from our first event with students on Friday of last week. It was quite small scale. It was I suppose then the evidence is anecdotal, but the anecdotal evidence is good, and it suggests to us that we're onto something. And that if we can, in particular, if we can use the expertise of people like Grahame to place these resources in contexts that are appropriate for students who are very different from, student bodies that are very different from those actually at Imperial, then we might be able to get some real benefits both for our institution as we get more students knowing about us and applying to us, and also, more importantly, really for the students themselves. So that's one of the things that's underway, and we will tell you more about that as we learn more about that. And there's another project that I'm also involved with, which is we're actually at an even earlier stage, where we're looking to build comprehensive online courses for students in the last 2 years of high school and their teachers. And we're aiming that at students from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds, areas of social deprivation and so on, and specifically at those who are trying to negotiate the boundary between the second highest grade, which we eccentrically call A, and the very highest grade, which we call A star. So we're looking to get those students, if we possibly can, across the A star boundary, which is the sort of thing that will get them admission to an institution like Imperial. And on that project, we're collaborating with another expert group, a group called MEI, Mathematics in Education and Industry, they were called at one time. And interestingly, I know that their expert opinion isn't on all issues the same as Grahame, so that's going to be quite an interesting experience working with them both. Very early stages on that, more as we learn more.
Yes, can I ask you all to stand up, except for Michael? Just stand up for a second. And then bend onto the front. And then sit down again, because now you have blood in your head and you're going to need it. I'm going to tell you why you're here at the DTU. First of all, if you look around, you can see this was an ordinary room for 160 students. And it has been built around because we have new technology. And one of the, in this university we have about 6,500 employees and only 8,000 students. And one of the things that we are doing here is we have, one research sector called imaging. And it's because if you have a picture, it tells more than 1,000 words. And it's obvious for everyone here why new technology, of course, is a good thing. So now I'm going to be a little provocative. I don't know if you have anything to write it on here, but the DTU Compute is the Mathematical Institute of DTU, and there's about 300 or 400 employees. And we already began, a change in the Danish education system around 1989, where we decided, okay, we're going to use Maple in the for all students starting at the university. And only 8 years later, all students in the high school are using Maple or some other cache software. And one of the new projects that Linda is involved with is that from this year, all students in the age of 11 would get free access to Maple in Denmark. And now comes some of the problems. Probably would mean that something like that, everybody should be able to solve by hand. You might also mean this one should be able to be solved by hand. But what if I do like this? What do I mean? And I think there's some trouble when you have, it's like drilling. You can say, okay, if you want to drill, you can do it by hand, but you can also use a machine. And with a machine, you can do it faster and better. And we also have to set some questions about what is actually needed to be able to do by hand. We all think, okay, by hand, you have to be able to do that. But this is actually true in the modern world. How many of you haven't got your handy mobile phone with you? Can you raise your hand if you don't have one? I can only see one guy, but he has a computer. and if you have this one, you can take photo mats, just scan this one, and you will get the result. And when you should try to explain somebody in the C class, why should I learn that? I can tell you the result, I don't have to do anything. So the challenge is really when you put in computer algebra systems in the education, you also have to decide what kind of questions will you ask. As I would say, instead of telling students whether they should try to make simple calculations, why don't you ask them about something like that, and then you ask, okay, if I calculate this one, how many zeros will be in that number? And you can even make it higher. And you know, for smaller kids, it's also interesting because it will take a lot of pages in Mabel, and there will be a lot of zeros in the end. And you should actually think about when you get a new tool, and we have now had it for about 20 years in Denmark, you have also to think about what should we be able to do by hand, and what could we actually skip. And I think this discussion we have totally forgotten. Also, when we took all this material into a Danish high school, we didn't change any of the problems except from the first year. And the first year when we had computer algebra in some classes to try out, what happened with the guys that was going to put up the exams? Oh, we have Mabel and we have Derive, so now we are going to give them some problems that the machines can't do. And when the machines can't do it, they couldn't do it out by hand. So I think we have to think much more about what kind of questions do we want to put up, because with modern technology, you can actually put up much more interesting questions. If the student can Google and find some, problem where they're interesting, and then we can go in and do the mathematics instead of you just, just as the smart guy, I'm calling him that because of his name, he just told us you can really do something to engage students in a very young age. But my thing is, we have to consider what kind of questions we are going to ask. And we have done just too much in the tradition. We are still going to do, we're still sitting in the 6th row, and we're still making the education in a lesson. But now when we can go online, why should the students come in so often? So, thank you.
So now the next part will be asking some questions of these people. So does anybody in the audience have any specific questions that they would like to ask the panel? And as I thought. Oh, Nicola, okay.
What is the question type or thing that you think would be most useful to get from A to A star, and how would you implement it in Mobius?
What is the question type?
I guess the concept that you think would be most useful to encode in Mobius that would give you the difference.
Right, well, I don't know, and we don't even know what Mobius's role will look like in that project yet. So it's very, very early to be answering that question. But we do have data that it is a problem. We do have data to the effect that it's particularly a problem for those students that we're trying to target. What I think we don't yet know and hope to find out is why it's a problem, and what it is about their examination performance that is different in some systematic way from the students who we are getting. I'm really not answering your question at all, but that's because I don't have the answer. I'll never stop growing.
I can't answer it from a Maple TA point of view, but if I put my teacher hat on and I'd say, and I was thinking as a teacher of A-level again, I think what would the difference be, or what would the exam board, how would the exam board differentiate between an A and an A-star candidate? And one of the problems, which I think Mobius could solve, is there isn't actually enough content at that very top end a lot of the time in the actual materials available. So there is actually a lack. I mean, you might disagree because of the MEI thing, but in the edXL, in the edXL specification, there isn't enough material available at the A-star level. So the fact that you could generate algorithmically some material at that level and then generate lots of variations would give those students a chance to practice that with the feedback already. If that was always the toughest boundary to crack, which I assume is the reason why you're doing it, Phil, the A to A star. The examples don't put enough stuff, good stuff out at that boundary, is what I would say.
And that therefore differentiates the type of school that you're at.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it is the case that in order to get an A star at A level, you need to score really very high in the exams. At least that's true at the moment. There's a curricular change that we're in the throes of, which may mean that grade boundaries come down. But you have to have an almost flawless performance in these examinations, or in many of them. And our hunch is that it may simply be curricular gaps. It may simply be things that, perhaps not in a systematic way, that some schools are better at achieving close to 100% curricular coverage at a high quality than others are. So that means that we may not be able to zero in on a single thing, or even a small number of things.
Right, I'll come back to that.
No. Go on to a different question so that other people can get involved. Okay, so I have a question which kind of follows along with Christian's 5-minute talk. How do we need to rethink or change pedagogy when using educational technology? So what do we have to do? What do we have to think about in terms of our content, in terms of our teaching methods, in terms of how we approach the subject, what models we use? So is there anybody who would like to talk on that?
I can talk all day on that if you want.
Okay, maybe someone else first. Anybody else other than just spread it around.
We talked a bit about this in our group earlier around as more and more technology becomes embedded within learning and teaching, potentially the role of the instructor and academic shifts in how you link up the types of skills you'll need to learn as a group, because this whole personal interaction, the social interaction types of learning, that's a key part of learning that you probably don't get very well in a digital interface. So how you enable students to learn to problem solve, or the techniques they adopt. They can do a lot of practice using digital tools. They can also be tested and assessed. But maybe working in a group, socialising, working out problems together. They're also very limited if you're working online by yourself, of just what you know and how you'd interpret it. So there's still that whole thing of everyone learns a little bit differently. Those elements are still there as humans, even when you're interacting in an online or digital space. So I think that role will change.
But I think that to have new technologies and also Maple, MapleTA, Möbius, it's not enough to change the way of learning and teaching math and STEM and other disciplines if the teacher doesn't change completely his role. This is the crucial point. We, in Italy, for the high school, we started a strong program of training for teachers, and it is very hard. It is very hard because, it's easy to explain that if you have an automatic assessment, you save time. This point is clear for teachers, but it's not enough. We ask them to rethink material, because material is, if you explain a concept on the blackboard, is completely different if you prepare material, especially with Möbius, that the student is supposed to use by alone. It's completely different. You have to think to the material, because you need technologies and material able to change the, able to change the processes of metacognitive processes, cognitive processes and not cognitive processes. It means that you have to go only to work on motivation for the student. Otherwise, you have very good material, but the student is not interested in. I think about students not very good in mathematics. And for medium, it's quite easy. We had experience that for students in medium level, if they are, sometimes they are not so fond of maths, but you can easily, with these tools, to go to help these students. But for the student with the deep difficulties or gap, the role of teacher is essential, but it must change.
Okay, we're going to move on and then we'll come back if we have time. Any other questions from the audience?
I would like to further a little bit on Marina's very nice comment and important comment, namely to ask if there is also notion of playfulness. Is there room for a notion of playfulness? I mean, hedonism in the use of Maple, TA, and Möbius that we could gain from, because we know that the young people are very much otherwise involved in games, and why not use this potential? I think that we tend to strap the full discussion into the straitjacket of classical education and curriculum, and I think it would be worthwhile to think out of that box and do better education.
That's a very good comment. Okay, so I have another question here for you guys. What is the best way to measure the impact of technology? Right, so either on your students or on your instructors. Who would like to start with that?
It's very hard to do this measurement, I think. In my research group, we started especially I have a strong group of young people, but especially I have two PhD students, Alice and Michele is here. And with Alice, we started from the pedagogical point of view with another colleague of mine. And if you want to really try to measure the improvement in using technologies, you have to do in a serious way. It means you, for instance, in the PhD thesis with 600 students, we start at the beginning of the year, where 300 students, classes using technologies, all technology, and then in another classes, normal classes. We started at the beginning, and we just finished, and every 2 months an assessment, activities, the presence of Alice with the teacher, because it depends also on, because if you start with a class and teacher use technology in a traditional way, it doesn't work. But only in this serious way you can verify that there is a improvement. Of course, we done this measurement in other experience. Now we start in a very serious way, because the scientific community, when you propose to use Möbius, Maple TA, the first question is why? Show me in a scientific way why.
Just to say, I think this is really, really hard, and the history of online and e-education is littered with failures to do this successfully. And one of the problems is the Hawthorne effect. One of the problems that even if you have a test group and a control group, and even if you make sure that it's the same member of staff who's dealing with them both, then there's an effect that is very difficult to control for, that has to do with that members of staff's feelings about the two interventions, the traditional and the classical one. And there is a sort of sense that you hear bruited about sometimes that big data and better quality analytics will somehow deal with this problem. But it's systemic, it won't be dealt with in that way. And that makes this a genuinely difficult question to answer. And I can't help thinking that part of the answer has to be good quality, qualitative data on things like self-efficacy, on things like how students feel about their competence in the subject and how they evidence that competence to themselves. So we're not just in the business, I would say, of gathering more and more data and running better and better analytic algorithms on it, although that's very important too.
Well, now we are at the GTU, so one of the mottos of GTU is that we try to invent technology to the benefit of society. And if you take a look, life has been built better with technology over the last decades. And the same is, of course, if you take impact of technology in the education system, it will be exactly the same. But of course, you always have to be aware of how you're going to use it. Because, as Thune asked, yeah, it's a good thing if you use it correctly. But it could also be a murderous thing. So.
Steve?
Just to speak to the data side, despite its problems. So Math 127, I just want to draw the data which Paul talked about. So the sample space is 1,000 students. In fall 12 and fall 2013, the number of students who either failed the course or withdrew or had a marginal pass was 45%, which seems like a big number to me. With the Mobius assets in fall 2017, that rate fell to 23%. Can't promise causality, but the correlation is nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm speaking from a student perspective, and what I'm seeing a lot is that we're talking about learning, and e-learning is a great toolbox to learn, but we have to remember that learning has evolved. I know the way that I learn is very individualized. My entire generation is basically relearning each our manner. I like to Google stuff. I'm a completely self-taught programmer and such. And it becomes very uncertain what are the things that we actually have to promote to learn a lot. What I've found is actually the most important key to actually developing talents, people who can learn by themselves, is actually the attitude towards learning. Going to school and actually saying, I want to learn something, not that I'm here to get a good grade, not that I'm here for money. For example, I know from myself, if I go up to an exam, I don't care about the grade, to be honest. I care about what can I learn. I'll easily take a B instead of an A if that means that I learn something I get to use.
Okay. All right, so next question. I do have 4, so next question. So what is one thought, or perhaps your first thought, when you are asked to describe the benefit of a tool like Mobius?
Yeah, you have to be quick as well, which is
You
unusual.
quick.
Less marking.
Okay, anybody else?
Well, I would say a very individual form from learning. You actually, just like this student said, he can learn everything by himself. He don't have to get into this university. He only have to get his log on. And not all students can, of course, do that. But I think there's a big benefit that you can make much more individualized education.
I just want to say on that, though, that we must make very sure that individualized doesn't mean atomized. There's a kind of dystopian thing that could happen where everybody's learning by themselves and is alone and in their rooms and isolated. And so we need to think, as well as thinking about how to best structure the individual learning experience, how we also use tools like Mobius to facilitate contact among peers, contact with student tutors and mentors, and contact with subject experts. We need to make sure that the individualized learning experience doesn't become a lonely one.
I would say it can be the ease of access and the accessibility of getting to materials and working in a way that works for you.
So I also agree the less marking is very nice. But as a consequence of that, it frees up a lot of resources. And so we've capitalized on this by introducing other components in the course, like projects, which didn't exist before. So for the science students, this is great. We have, throughout the term, we have them work on sort of more real-world type problems that are multi-stage, and they have to present a solution. So it's just sort of freeing up resources, I guess. So I mean, it really changes the way you present the entire course, right? You've got this new tool, and then you have to sort of re-envision how do I approach the other elements of the course now with this new tool. And I guess another thing that I'm looking forward to is with these sort of interactive lectures available, you can start exploring things like a flipped classroom model or partly flipped classroom model if you don't want to commit to the full thing. So yeah, it just sort of, it gives you a lot more options.
I'm allowed this time.
Yeah.
Can I just say as well, I think there's, I mean, one of the big benefits of Marchisio in the UK, and I'm sure it's probably the same in other European countries as well, and Canada, we just don't have enough teachers at A level, good teachers at A level. So, and if you go into, you know, as I do, and I observe lots and lots and lots of maths lessons at all key stages, at all levels, a typical, I won't use the word average, a typical A-level lesson is pretty poor. The technology could do a better job. The feedback from the technology would be better than the feedback they're getting from the teacher in some cases. So that is a huge benefit. That's not necessarily exclusive to Mobius, but the technology could actually perhaps improve the experience the learner is getting to what they're actually getting in the physical. And that's slightly controversial to say that, but that is the reality.
Any other questions from the audience?
I was just going to quickly comment on the last suggestion or comment. And one thing that MPT has done for us is sort of allow almost like the standardization of coursework, because we have instructors that are extremely non-tech savvy and other instructors who are very tech savvy. And what that's doing is it's creating a divide amongst students and faculty, whereby a student will attend the first lecture and they see a bunch of gizmos on the screen that are moving and a lot of heart and passion's gone into developing that lesson, and they stay. Whereas a traditional lecturer who, I think it was Steve described, starts writing in one corner of the board and ends writing in the end of the bottom of the board, and they talk the whole time to the board. We're finding that students want to transfer from those classes to the other classes, and we're finding that they're doing so because of lectures, because of technology, and inability for faculty to stay on the same page. And we can't expect them to, but Mobius has allowed our faculty the opportunity to build collective or common courseware so they can share assets. And we get instructors who build 100 questions a day. We get other questions who build, instructors who build like one question a week. And that's what they can keep up with. But certainly to speak toward that, when you say sort of the typical lesson maybe is not very well carved, Mobius does simply present that solution to us. It can become more of a collaborative effort.
And that's at a higher level than what I've done.
Exactly.
What I'm talking about, but it's even more short.
I can say that was true in practice for us as well. The lessons that we developed for Math 127, 128 were then passed off to, well, other instructors, the terms that we were teaching, but in the follow-up semesters to other instructors that we weren't even working with, and they used those lectures. Not to say they weren't good instructors, I don't know. But it standardized the course a bit and gave them this set of tools to work with.
Okay, so the last question that I have here is a little bit sort of more on the training side. With every new technology, of course, there's that learning curve for students and for instructors. So in your opinions, now that you've used Mobius, you've used MapleTA, what type of training, what is the best type of training that's needed to help new users make the most of the technology? Both from an instructor point of view in either creating the material, the quality of their material, delivering the material, or from the student's point of view in terms of navigating the system and even entering expressions like was discussed earlier this morning.
First of all, we published those paper in which we explain the model that we develop for teachers, essentially, for teachers both high school or the university, in order to learn how to use in their didactics these tools. In this model, we adopted training face-to-face. We start from some material because they want immediately to realize that these tools are able to prepare material for their classes, their courses. So we have in presence some hours, and then in distance by a platform, because usually in Italy they use these tools inside Moodle. So we have our platform, which was financed by the Compagnia di San Paolo, Bank Foundation of Torino, is integrated with the web conference system. So every week we have a synchronous appointment in which we explain how to use them. And of course, in the platform, we are able to answer by forum in a synchronous way. But for the students, both students and teachers, in the PhD research project of Michele, we are developing a way using natural language inside the virtual learning environment and with a fixed ontology, a way how to find material when you want to learn alone, and especially, for instance, just to be clear, if I fail in a question bank in MapleTA, if I fail because I am not able to give the right answer, probably I have some gaps. So in this automatic way, I go back in order to check all the prerequisites that are you have to discover which one, or with more than one, you don't have clear, and in this way you are not able to answer to the question. This is the future, but I hope that we are starting to develop the prototype.
I think I like this question, this example very well, because I think it's wrong. I think you have to put students up next to instructors. And when I think we have to think like that, okay, everybody should be able to navigate. Everybody should be able to enter in. But what we also should train the students to do is actually to give them a child class where they could create material. Because there's a big difference if a student is going to make an exercise. They have to rethink a lot more if it's just going to make a solution. So I think this is the best example. We actually had to put the students up and make them also try to be a bit creative. And sometimes we come up with things that's even better than I can do.
It does say catch.
Yes, that's right.
It's a quite safe. I've got to say, I think the ideal for students should be, they shouldn't need training. It should just work. And we're nearly there, but we're not quite there. And a number of things would get us there. One of the main things being, I think, a consistent, easily learnable syntax that's the same in all contexts and that has rules that are intuitive and that they can learn very quickly. That's not to say there may never be a need for training, but there should be a threshold of 0 for students, I think. And the threshold should be very low for colleagues as well. Training is a barrier. Training is a time commitment that colleagues don't have, that are often not in a position to make. So things like the boot camps, for example, fantastically useful, really, really good. Some very, very valuable time. But you must be able to get started without that, and get a long way without that. And that, I think, means that a lot of early training for colleagues is self-training and involves asking the question, how do I do this, and being able to find the answer readily. So I would focus on those things, lowering the threshold down to 0 for students and as low as we possibly can for authors. And then think about, because the question was about new users, then start thinking about how to answer the needs of users who are becoming more ambitious.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much to the panelists Let's give them a round of applause. So now, panelists, you're welcome to stay up here. I'm going to shift things up a little bit for the last sort of 15 minutes and talk about sharing content. So you can stay here and you can again feed in, but I want this to be a bigger discussion among everybody in the room. So I want to hear from everyone else about some of these items. So here I have sort of 3 slides that have questions on them, or discussion points on them, in 3 different sort of categories. And I think they really sort of sum up some of the things that we've heard at the summit in the last 2 days. So the first is discussion points, the cloud. So we've heard in the last couple of days that the cloud, that people have a hard time finding the content that they want. So my question is, so how would you find it? How do you want to search? What information is important? What types of content are you looking for? Or are you looking at a school? Like, what is it that you're trying to find, and how are you trying to find it?
It could be nice if you could search by school type, if it's a business high school or a technical high school or some kind of university or some type of course in a university, so you can be more specific in what you're seeking for in the maybe TA.
Okay, that's great.
I think for me, it's got to be curriculum linked. So if I know that I've got to prepare a lesson on, I don't know, integration at A2, I want to be able to find all the best questions, integration A2. The problem is, what we call integration A2 will be different in Italy, different in Canada. So, I mean, surely it seems to me with some of the brains in this room that if you put some metadata in that is a grade B, say in England, that is equivalent somewhere else, and it creates a sort of chain effect so that information, that piece, that asset is tagged for lots of different curriculums at the same time. Maybe not too many because it will get too complex, but where we're in collaboration in those countries, because that would save everybody a huge amount of time.
I know that somebody who once worked for another company set out to do that a few years ago. Luke Bartolet. I don't know. I think he found it was quite difficult, but I'll see how. I'll ask him how he got on.
Be a good solution.
What was I going to say? So yeah, I'm sure I'm not the only person from an institution that has a legal department that has a view on sharing content. That's a big issue for me. I mean, I want to share content, I just want to do it, and they don't work that way. So it would be very nice if there were kind of models for mutually beneficial licensing arrangements, that just templates that worked in one's jurisdiction, that we could just say to the legal department, how do you think, would you sign that, or do you want to tweak it, or and so agreements that were in some sense templated, that would smooth things over a lot.
All right, so, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was going to comment, like, right now, I find if you go into the search on the cloud, you type in Bernoulli, and expecting to find 5,000 questions of Bernoulli something. You find sometimes nothing. And they're definitely, they have to be there. There's even times when I've built questions like adding vectors, and I've shared them on the cloud through one account, and then gone into the other account, typed in the word vector in the search, and it comes up with 2 results. And neither one of the 2 are the question that I shared.
Right.
So it seemingly is the search functionality from the textual-based search mentality is very broken. I mean, there was a question I built that was drag and drop, and I type in drag and drop, I can't find it, even though it's in the name of the question.
Right.
But then I search by HTML question type, and then there's like only 15 of them that show up, and one of them is called drag and drop, and I go, oh, that's the one I'm looking for. And it just doesn't seem to produce any results, the textual-based search.
So I think concerning templates, we really need a template. We need the Microsoft and DigitalEd to come up with a template for inserting metadata. And we cannot do that individually. Each school, we need a global company to do that for us, and then we must stick to it. And maybe it can even be advanced by automatic search engines in the things and worksheets and TA questions that are put on into the cloud.
Great, that's a terrific idea in terms of getting some metadata, and I agree. You know, right now someone can put learning objective without a space or with a space, with capitals, without capitals, and we need to somehow be able to get down to sort of one piece of content that goes with that. Okay, next question. So what do you need in a tool that would be used for sharing? What are some specific things that if you want to share content and you want to be able to search on content, what types of other things that other than what we've talked about so far would you look for in that type of a tool?
So I think that so what I've seen, at least in for instance, MATLAB developers, their file sharing system, which I find very interesting, is that you can choose to inherit part of like what you are producing from another project, and you can credit these projects very easily, link them to like display that this was inspired by another project, and you can have whole chains of links and trees of development of different kinds of material coming from the same like base code, and I think something similar could work here. Where you can build on top of what someone else has done already and share this, and of course there should be some credit going through the system, and that should be at least be a simple way of doing something like that.
Anybody else up there? Okay. A quick comment, and then we're going to.
I think I'd like to see two things actually: the assets that are being most used, and the ones I would like some sort of a rating system. I would like, because obviously, I mean, some of the questions, like for instance, I'm looking at those questions, I'm thinking, A, I like them, B, I'd like to know how you did them, and lots of other things. So there's going to be a lot of questions there that I'm not interested in, right? So if I could eliminate a lot of those straight away and have a smaller population to search for them in the beginning, that would speed everything up.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the next category is the content itself. Right, so I had a discussion last night in terms of sharing content, and is it really the actual questions that you want to share, the question that you want to implement in your classroom? Is that what you want to share, or is the idea that you want to share examples of content? So I would like to see a question that is similar to this, and then I can take it and modify it to my own. To my own particular use, to my own particular content? Or do you really I want questions that I can implement tomorrow in my class? So what type of content are people most interested in?
I've got staff and they're interested a lot in being able to modify questions, but it's particularly where there is algorithmic elements. Because they don't want to rewrite lots of code, so whether it's the visual design ones that you sort of demonstrated, or others where there's lots of grading code or variable coding they could reuse. I think that's quite an important element of knowing that. And then also, I suppose, I don't know, but we've seen because we're here, lots of really good examples of question types. It's almost maybe that showcase of here's a good question list, or it's like samples of inspiration, which could be curated by maybe themselves, and the ability to curate a collection. And then, if let's say I saw one of the questions you had, Mark, I could, if you wanted, maybe the option to contact that person to find out a bit more, or contact within the institution, because obviously you don't want to be bombarded. But I think that inspirational element, because you don't know what you don't know. It's only if I'm here once a year that I might see some of these questions.
Right.
And maybe also a forum where you can ask, I need to solve this type of question. I want a question that can do this, this and this. Are there someone that can help me? And then you can get the feedback and try using that one or that type of a method.
So again, I'll mention, Johnny mentioned it earlier, the mobiuscommunity.com, that is sort of part of the idea behind that, is being able to have a forum of the community of people that are creating content, being able to communicate. And the idea that the Mobius Ideas forum that Johnny discussed again this morning in terms of putting in some suggestions and things like that, like some of these of, can we get a showcase of material, are good suggestions.
So I think a way also of doing this could be like if you allow users to have favorites, like they could favorite questions, but maybe give it even more flexibility so they can categorize questions on their own. That will also probably give you some material to begin to systematically give suggestions based on what other people categorized together. In that way you can build a bigger library of suggestions and data for.
Okay, so I'm going to go on, and then at the end I'll give you guys a chance to summarize anything that you want to say. So this one is just a general one, sort of what courses are of most interest, whether they're core courses, specialty courses, or just variations of courses. So I'm going to skip that one, and I'm going to move to the last kind of question, which is the discussion points in terms of actually sharing the content. So the first question is, would you be willing to share your content? And most people I've talked to say either yes, or say yes but, right? And so the second part of the question is, who would you be willing to share your content with? Because, as Grahame mentioned, sometimes content that he's working on would work for a subset of the Mobius community. It wouldn't necessarily work for absolutely everyone. And is there a way that we can sort of distinguish these groups so that you can get that smaller subset of content? And I'll throw out the last question at the same time, which is, what are your requirements for sharing? Right? From a university, a personal, or a legal point of view, and then also from a content point of view. Right? So Nico was talking yesterday in terms of more than willing to share content, more than willing to work with people, but we want some give and take. Right? We want there to be a true sharing. We don't want just someone to be involved who's only taking all of our ideas and not contributing to the collective. Right? And then the other concern always is that quality concern. And so we talked a little bit about that in terms of ranking of questions, both from how many times has it been used and how the students found it, but also a ranking of questions from instructors who have used it. So any thoughts on any of that?
One thing I think I've heard people say, and this is about the usability of questions, quality, rigor, etc., is it's how you're going to use the questions when you share it, and when you're reusing content, the other thing to be thoughtful of is where the question could crop up elsewhere. Now, one big challenge I think we would face internally with our students is with the student voice, is around if someone is teaching and has just reused lots of maths questions, even if they are good quality, they could raise the question of why have I paid this much to do this module? And that would not be very good press in our student newspaper. So that would be one of the factors we would have to think of in the reusability. We also have in many of our departments that certain questions cannot be reused, certainly sort of from an exam point of view. But even if you moderately tweak that, you've got to be careful, because students aren't silly over the years and who can share what with who. So there is that part of it as well, that it will be an inhibitor in sort of how we reuse questions.
Well, I think I would share anything, and I don't care if I get anything back. I would, of course, I would say everything that I think that is good, and if it's not so good, I would keep it. But everything I think is good. It's just like writing a book. It's just like writing in the sand on the coastal line, and then the next, wave is coming in. It's exactly the same. It's gone after some time. But I think you should share as much as you can, and don't care about if you're getting something back. hopefully some of the students will get something out of it somewhere.
Thank you. I want to second that comment from Christian and even go a bit further, namely to second his previous comment that we should learn how to use students as a resource. So we should even share with the students locally, and then maybe having a filter to the global, but maybe not even that.
All right, well, thank you everyone for your time and attention today. That was a great session, and I'm hoping that the product managers and the director of engineering have all been listening intently to some of your answers and your suggestions for over the last hour and a half. Thank you again to the panelists, and I think Johnny's going to come up to close out the conference.